In this episode, we're talking with Justin Nickerson from Apollo Auctions, and we're going to explore the imbalance between an auctioneer's skill level and that of an individual bidder. You'll often hear me saying that the transparency of an auction is a positive for property buyers, but on its own, is that enough of a benefit? How can a buyer ever be a fair match for an auctioneer at the top of their game? Well, we're about to find out.
Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. This is the podcast where we love to talk about the big things in property that never usually get talked about. I'm Veronica Morgan, real estate agent, buyer's agent and buyer's agent mentor, co-host of Foxtel's Location Australia, author of Auction Ready and co-host of Your First Home Buyer Guide.
And I'm Chris Bates, mortgage broker, recently ranked number 5 in Australia out of over 18,000 brokers in the annual MPA Top 100 Mortgage Broker Awards. Before we get started, I need to let you know that nothing we say here can be taken as personal advice. We always recommend you engage the services of an appropriate and experienced professional.
Our guest today is Justin Nickerson, a leading auctioneer and trainer. Justin is the only Australian to win the Australasian Auctioneer of the Year 3 times in the history of the award. He's also a 5-time winner of the REIQ Auctioneer of the Year award, again being the only auctioneer in the state to achieve this distinction. And he works hand in hand with some of Australia's leading real estate businesses on an auctioneering and coaching level. And with these insights forms the key foundation to his relevant and engaging training and speaking engagements. And we're hoping that he will bring some of these insights and share them with us today. Welcome, Justin. It's been great to have you on the podcast today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Justin, it's good to meet you again. I mean, obviously, we had a chat offline before today about that we met at the Pippa conference a couple of years ago and on a panel together. And that day you were selling the new Queensland record. I think you just said 24 million plus. I mean, I guess it's interesting, the Brisbane market, right? And being an auctioneer up there. I mean, why do you believe it's sort of the best way to transact, putting your personal bias to one side?
Yeah, I think it's fair to acknowledge that personal bias is quite heavy. I get paid to call auctions, so my opinion is not one that's in any way fair or unbalanced, or balanced, I should say. Look, I think the biggest thing around auctions is just the transparency that's there. Auctions provide you a visibility that no other method of sale does, which is an ability to look across a room, see who is trying to buy the property you want to buy, see what amount they would buy the property for. And that information empowers you so much with decision making. Every other method of sale is a format that relies on cloak and daggers, but it goes behind darkness and behind curtains. So I love that transparency and the visibility of auctions. And I think that's why, personally, when I buy property or I'm bought property, I always prefer to buy in an auction context rather than a multiple offer, which is usually the other scenario. Do you think that's, like, as someone in the real estate game, I guess, is it, I mean, it's kind of like the same for us as brokers. Once you sort of, we're out there to get the structure right and their pre-approval, etc. But we're not there tied to trying to find a property, right? So we always know we can get the finance, right? But I think when you get into a real estate agent, you've got to just sell what you've got. A buyer's agent's at the mercy of the market. Is that, I mean, I guess why it makes it a little bit easier to be a great auctioneer is that really your job's quite simple in terms of you haven't got to play those games, I guess, that maybe other people in the real estate world have to play. Well, I think we're different in that we've got such a short-term relationship with buyers and sellers and agents. Now, we may deal with agents multiple times, which we certainly do, but in terms of the buyers and the sellers, it is a very, very short-term relationship. Like sellers, we're going to be dealing with them for probably an hour. Buyers, 10 minutes less than that by the time we come in contact with them at some stage. So I think I've always seen that as being the auctioneer's role is that of kind of finishing touches. We refer to ourselves as the 3%. The listing agent is generally the 97% that does a lot of the legwork, the foundational work, whereas we sort of come to the end. But I think having that kind of wide view of the landscape, the market, the way transactions are unfolding at that particular point in time across a variety of price points and geographical locations does give you more a wider knowledge base than maybe one refined sort of product type. So that's something we're always trying to lead on in those conversations is while we may not be an expert in, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom houses in Parramatta, for example, we are experts in buyer and seller behaviour because we see it, countless times every week. And those behaviours lead to patterns, and those patterns as well outcomes from both parties.
You're Brisbane based, and Brisbane isn't seen as an auction capital. And what's regarded as a high clearance rate, for example, in Brisbane is much lower than it is in Sydney and Melbourne. For example, if people say to me sometimes in Brisbane, oh, the clearance rate was 35%, they're not upset by that. Whereas in in Sydney and Melbourne, we'd be devastated because literally anything under 70% is difficult, right? And so, I mean, there's a success rate, if you want to call it that, in auctions, and that is when you sell it under the hammer, right? And I want to get into the quoting regime in Brisbane as well, because that is so different. And you mentioned multiple offer scenario. So that's the alternative in Brisbane, where if you don't put an asking price on a property and it doesn't go to auction, usually what happens is it goes into, and there's more than one buyer, it goes into this really, really opaque, quite painful offer process where it's called the multiple offer process. I mean, you can tell us more about this, Justin, I'm sure, but the agent can't tell the buyers what other buyers have offered, and often it's a sudden death, and you're basically left there sitting, I actually don't know where to pitch my offer because A, there's been no price guide, and B, I've got no idea where the other buyers are at. So in that scenario, I'm actually surprised auctions aren't more popular in Brisbane, but it is a totally different market, isn't it, to the rest of Australia?
Look, it is, but it isn't in some ways. We probably underwent a bit of a revolution in 2021 off the back of that COVID market through South East Queensland, where prior to that auction was probably looked at as secondary method of sale, whereas now it's probably the primary method of sale. I would say it's funny. So our company, Apollo Auctions, is all the way throughout Australia and through New Zealand as well. So all our metrics that we track are across both countries. But in terms of national clearance rates this year, there's only been 4 occasions where Sydney and Melbourne have a higher clearance rate than Brisbane. So it's really interesting that Brisbane has kind of gone the opposite direction a little bit to what it was traditionally from what you were sort of mentioning, now that it is quite a mature auction place in that regard, and the market was being less volatile than it has been in Sydney and Melbourne. Now, Sydney and Melbourne probably have a greater upswing because of the fact the infrastructure there is so much stronger than Brisbane, and jobs and so on and so forth. But this year in particular, Brisbane's been a really solid, consistent performer as opposed to the other two. So I think the multiple offer thing it's just difficult because everyone wants transparency. Like that's what everyone wants, right? They want to have some visibility on what's going on, and they're just, with multiple offers, just isn't the way for that to happen. And even auction as a method of sale, when it comes to price, there's no transparency on price. So the price is hidden basically in essence for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and then the negotiation is fully transparent. Whereas private treaty is the opposite. Private treaty, there is sometimes transparency around price, but then if you go into a negotiation in multiple parties, you lose all the transparency there. So at some point of a buying journey, you're going to have to embrace a lack of transparency, and at some point you may get to embrace transparency, but I would rather have it when I'm negotiating because I think that's the most critical part.
Yeah, I think what you said there's quite salient actually, in the sense that Sydney and Melbourne's markets have been a lot less strong than the Brisbane market. And I guess a hot market is really ideal auction conditions, isn't it? Because you're confident you're going to get more than one bidder, and then you put them all in the forum at the same time. And I remember when I was a sales agent, I worked within an auction agency, and so there were times when we do these blind negotiations when somebody wanted to make a pre-auction offer. And it's interesting because there were some times when I'd be really surprised in the blind scenario where somebody would pay way ahead, way more than the other buyers. Whereas in auction, it's very rare to get that big difference between the ultimate buyer and the underbidder. Sometimes you can get that in blind. So there's pros and cons for both, I guess. And you never,
absolutely,
you've got no parallel universe, so you don't actually know which one would have been the best one. But I've heard it argued that Andrew Winter from Selling Houses Australia, he gets on LinkedIn every now and then, and he put this post on there that having a go at Queensland agents, saying that they love that they aren't allowed to give auction price guides because, of course, it is against the law up there. Do you agree that agents like not being able to give a guide? Is it good for agents, do you think?
I would fundamentally disagree, and I would happily debate this face-to-face with him. because we deal with agents every single day of the year. I did 2 trainings this morning with agents where we spoke about how to navigate not being able to price guide. And we do every session in Queensland. They say so much, I wish it was New South Wales where we give a price guide. So the overwhelming sentiment is they wish they could do it because all they get met is frustration. So they get frustration from buyers that say, oh, we're from Sydney, we get a price guide down there, so why can't you give me one? Or some agents are giving them, therefore they expect everyone to give it. So, yeah, I think it's funny though, because then we do sessions in New South Wales, and you know what they say in New South Wales? Oh, it's too convoluted, the price guide system. I wish we could just have no price guides. So I just think we're always sometimes a victim of kind of the grass is a little bit greener on the other sides. My inherent belief is I actually agree with Andrew, which I prefer no price guides, because we talk about one of the biggest benefits of auction is no price market. So it's keeping the price away from it, allowing emotional engagement and competition to kick in. So it's no price marketing. Yet we list it and then we put a price guide on it. It has a price. So I would rather have no price and not have to worry about adjusting guides being in certain ranges, getting an offer and adjusting your guide, all those kinds of things. And in fact, the New South Wales agents that we work with and we coach, we say, look, our advice is you actually launch it without a guide and then use a guide if you need it to adjust the campaign. Because once the guide's on it, you can't be undone.
Well, because you also said earlier that people like transparency, so no guide is actually not very transparent at all. I remember when I was a sales agent having that debate with our auctioneer that he trained us and was really going blue in the face trying to teach us not to use price guides. But we know that buyers like them. Even though as a buyer's agent, as a real estate educator, I'm encouraging people to do their own price research and determine their own view of what the price should be, both in terms of market sense, but also in terms of what they would be prepared to pay. But at the same time, there's sort of like it's an anchoring tool, right? Which
I think the only thing I'll say, Veronica, is the buyers want a price guide, but then the moment that price guide is out of step with what happens, they bang on a drum saying it's unfair. And sometimes natural competition just kicks in and pushes prices to levels we didn't expect. And yet the price gets pointed out, well, that was baiting. Well, it wasn't baiting at the time of evidence. That's what was reasonable. So, yeah, it's such a nuanced debate. I think the one thing that I wish we had was national legislation. That's the one thing I wish we had, because if we had that, a lot of our problems would go away because everyone would be operating on the same token. We've got the ridiculous situation in Tweed Heads. So we call auctions for companies in Tweed Heads and Coolangatta. We do interim auctions where the first 3 lots might be from Queensland. So you can't get a price guide, and you can place as many vendor bids as you like. And then the next auction will be in New South Wales, which you can get a price guide for. You can have one vendor bid and the highest bidder gets first right to negotiate. And then you go back to Queensland where you don't have to call properties on the market. Then back to New, like, it's just ridiculous. Like it honestly is. National legislation would be a boon for everyone, I think.
Well, what do you think for buyers though? Do you think that...
Also, I could go for 2 hours on this topic, so, you know...
Yeah. I could too.
Yeah. It was just putting on the buyer side though. What do you reckon is better for a buyer? Like, do you think that, in New South Wales, the low price guide creates a little bit more competition because you've got a few more hopeful people there, whereas in Queensland, a few people do their own research and, have a much better idea of what it's going to sell for? Like, do you notice any difference? Like, what do you think?
I guess that's why I like the cleanliness of no price guide, because it puts the onus on the buyers to do their research and discover. And, I think the hard part about a price guide is the price guide the expected figure you think the property should sell for? Is the price guide the expected figure the seller would accept? Because those figures at the start of a campaign are markedly different. Markedly different. So where do you guide it? Or do you guide in between, which is neither of the figures that it should be? Like, that's the problem, is you kind of have this convoluted space. Whereas the thing I like about it is there's no price guide, therefore we can't get in trouble with the wrong price guide.
No, that's right.
We're just allowing the buyers to peruse recent sales evidence that exists, that's factual, but let them make their own decision and determination. And if they come up with their own guide as to where they think it should be, and then the option happens and it's out of step, then it's on them and not on something the owner, the agent has done.
True.
Because, this... not to defend our industry, but it is in our industry very quick to point fingers, or the agent did that, or the agent baited, or the agent did that, or quite often the agents have just done their job, and through circumstance and, as things have planned out, it's been a result that's been occurred. So, Yeah, it's one of those ones that gets people all fired up, that's for sure. But again, it is what it is, right? Like,
can you use that to your advantage though, as an auctioneer, right? You go, look, because there's no price guide, does it help you in either way? Like if you had to try to get a better outcome, do you think the price guide helps you or makes it harder for you, or same?
I think it helps us. It helps us to achieve premium prices, sometimes not having a price guide, because it doesn't put a limited number in buyers' heads. But sometimes you can have buyers in Queensland, or more often in buyers, you can have buyers in Queensland that are way, way, way off base as to where it needs to be. And if there'd been a guide on the property, they wouldn't be there.
Right.
So there's probably advantages on kind of either side, I think.
Yeah, because, I mean, as an auctioneer, you've got to corral everybody, don't you? And it's no good for you if you've got, say, 5 buyers and they've all got widely different, ideas of where they should be bidding. You've got to try to get them all into the fray, right? I would imagine a price guide to some degree helps as an auctioneer, because at least you think, well, they're all in at that guide. So that's my baseline. That's where I started off at. How do you work out where to start it off in the absence of all that sort of information?
Yeah, I'll usually ask the agent as to where kind of market feedback has been. So where about market feedback, where's the offers been, and then work backwards off that. And then the figure that we start the auction at is also dependent upon how many registered bidders we have. So we really want to go down the legislation path. The 2 wildest bits of legislation I reckon that exist in auctions in Australia. The first one is in Western Australia, you can have 10 vendor bids.
Yeah.
That's such a random number. Like, and if someone sits out there counting,
someone's going to count
9.
them.
I better slow up. I'm at 9. The second one is that in Victoria, you do not have to register to bid. That blows my mind that that's the case in the auction capital. So you usually go to Commerce, the auction capital of Australia. Like, registration is one of the rare bits of law that everybody wins. The seller wins because of the fact that they know the buyer's details, so they can, sell it to someone who exists. The buyers win because they know who they're up against, that they're real people. And the agent wins because they know how many bidders they have. Like, everyone wins. And the only argument that I hear is, oh, well, we've never done it. We've had people roll up on the day and buy properties. Well, they can still buy the property. They just got to register. All they have to do is hand their license over. It's not a particularly arduous process. Anyway, so that's probably the big one that sort of gets me. So in terms of the starting bidding figure, as we work on how many registered bidders we have, and if there's a higher number, we can start lower. If there's a lower number, we start higher. Whereas at Victoria, I feel so sorry for them, because you can have a crowd of 60 people and you can either have 60 bidders or you can have 0. Like, that's difficult, really difficult.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was an agent before the registration laws came in Sydney in 2003.
Showing your age now, Veronica.
I really am showing my age, yeah. And I remember when I was a brand new agent, I used to go to auctions where I didn't know who the buyers were. I was trying to train myself, the body language and watching what's going on. And I'd go and I'd just be observing, trying to work out who's exhibiting signs that they might bid, know. And so it's just one of my own little trainings. And then in September 2003, the requirement to register came in, and that took that guessing game out of it. It did change things though, because of course it took away dummy bidders as well. Do you, as an auctioneer, I know you don't want dummy bidders. There might be some agents that want dummy bidders. There might be some vendors that want dummy bidders. But definitely, I wasn't even going to talk about dummy bidders today. But I'm just we're there. How do you tell? Because I'm pretty certain that you'd be able to pick a dummy bidder.
It's becoming less and less and less frequent. Now, I don't know for sure that I've had dummy bidders at auctions, but I know there's situations and circumstances where I feel like the seller has put someone there to get to a certain number. There's a few very clear tells that they can do in terms of how they bid and particularly how they negotiate and what number they pull up at and different things like that. Our advice to owners is always just stay out of it. Like, let us do what you're paying us to do, which is to do the job. If you try and artificially manufacture a result here, 9 times out of 10, it's going to blow back in your face and there's going to be a problem. Outside the fact that it's also illegal. So, notwithstanding that it's outside the law, I think again, we talk about the evolution of auctions. You know, there's stories about the old days where the palm trees used to bid on properties, or the jacaranda down the road. And like the good thing is we've moved past that. We preach about transparency, and we're actually doing a session this morning with the team, and we spoke about how if you have one registered bidder, tell them they're the only registered bidder. Don't try and manufacture something. Just tell them the only registered bidder. And I think if we as an industry want the general public to stop thinking that we're scummy, which they do, we've got to stop doing scummy things, because if we keep doing scummy things, then they're justified in their opinion. So I'm glad that's been the kind of evolution of it, and the registration is a good thing. And I actually think the bar for registration is too low. I actually think that we should have to pay a deposit to register, which is refunded to you after you're not successful. It just stops people registering on a whim that have no intentions of buying properties. So yeah.
I'm astounded how many people register and then don't do anything. And it's not even they're necessarily competitive. You just go, why did you bother? Like,
I'll go to my grave wondering why someone would walk in, give their license to a stranger, get a paddle, put it in their back pocket, watch an auction with their arms crossed, auction ends, unpack their arms, get their paddle out and hand it back. What is the point?
I guess even in mid-auction though, you can still register, right? Because I think it's one of the things is you don't have to be registered by the start, right? I think that's sometimes people believe that as well, don't they?
Yeah, up to the fall of the hammer. So, we've had some last minute drama where people registered right at the end of the hour, and it adds a bit of excitement to it all.
But I've seen people, interrupt and disrupt an auction, register in the middle of it, and still not do anything.
I had a very high profile example of this, Veronica, on my Instagram about a couple of months ago, where a lady did exactly that. Disrupted the auction, registered, made a big song and dance about it. 2 bids later, 10 grand later, I went over because she wasn't bidding and we're about to sell it. Went to her and said, "Can we get you involved?" And she was quite abrupt in her feedback to me. You're welcome to head to my Instagram if you want to watch this video, and we sold it. And this video sort of went viral. Not that I really know how viral this, but we've had 800,000 views on it. The Daily Mail did a story on it, and of course, the argument was she singled out or anything like that? But it just made no sense to me, because she registered and we're only $10,000 up. Like, we're so close to where she registered, but she didn't want to engage. So, it makes no sense to me sometimes.
Well, Justin, I mean, if you had to sort of, we used to always get this advice, right? Bidding tomorrow, what should I do? I mean, what do you think? Like, if I know there's going to be different strategies for different days, but where have you seen the most successful bidders? If you had to sort of put your hat on going into an auction tomorrow, what would be your go-to strategy if you didn't have too many pieces of market information?
Yeah, well, the ones that we've done, which I think is the truest test of your words, is what you do yourself. The first one is don't be afraid to start. So one of the favourite statistics we have out of our business is that 68% of times the opening bidder buys the property.
Now, is that true? Because I've heard a lot of auctioneers give that similar statistic, and I say, do you actually track that? And they've sheepishly all said to me, no. Do you actually track that?
We absolutely do.
Right.
Yep. And we're talking for a basis 7,500 auctions last year through Australia, New Zealand. So
68%.
68% of times the opening bidder buys the property. Yep. So that's the first thing. The second one is just bid quickly. So you don't have to bid huge amounts, but bidding quickly does two things. The first thing is it gives the impression that you're never stopping. So it makes the illusion like you're not constricted by budget.
Yeah.
But secondly is it forces your competitors to continually make decisions. So while they're deciding if they're going to bid, you should be deciding if you're going to bid immediately if they bid. And they go, 10 more, bang, 10 more. And all of a sudden they're making a decision again. We're good to go? Yep. 10, bang, making a decision again. And that decision making becomes overwhelming. It's a bit of a riddle, but we say that the person under the least amount of stress during the auction is the highest bidder because they're already in front.
Yeah.
So the pressure is on everyone else to try and take those rights off them. That's the advice. Certainly what we've done, and we've tried to buy property at auction is do that, and that's the advice I give to sort of friends and family as well.
I'm on a personal mission to help more people make better property decisions, and you can find out all about what I'm working on at veronicamorgan.com.au. There you will find resources for first home buyers, details about my buyer's agent mentoring program, information about my newest project, Preferential, proactive property management in Sydney, or if you're looking to buy your dream home or investment property in Sydney's inner west, eastern suburbs or lower North Shore, you can connect with my team at Good Deeds Property Buyers. And if you'd like a 30% discount plus free postage for my book Auction Ready, How to Buy Property at Auction Even Though You're Scared Shitless, and yes, I'm a potty mouth, use the code ELEPHANT at the checkout.
If you're looking to buy your first home, thinking of upgrading to a new home, or purchasing an investment property anywhere in Australia, we would love to carefully guide you through this journey and importantly get the finance right. Please reach out to myself and the team at flinggroup.au. And what happens if you sort of want to, Veronica will have lots of, be on the other side of it, right? But how do you sort of spice it up and get some of those edges? Do you cut bids up? Do you put funny numbers? Like, what are some of the other tactics that you've seen people ruffle feathers and get better results from?
If I see Veronica at the auction, I just put my paddle down and walk out. I'm like, you know what, I'm cooked, so she's got my go.
Ha ha ha.
No, I think a lot of some of those tactics are overrated. Like, people asking you when the market constantly is an overrated tactic. Trying to slow the bidding down is an overrated tactic. Like, you're trying to drop it to ones, all you're showing is into shoveling. Like, that's not that they want to get. So I think just confidence is key. And if you don't have the confidence, you want to, like the duck, right? You want to be calm on the surface, legs kicking underneath. Even if you're rattled underneath, if you're getting close to the limit, be the duck that glides along the surface. So there's three figures that we talk about, which is your dream figure, your fair figure, and your absolute figure. So the dream figure is the figure that you just be a dream if you bought it for. You don't think it's realistic, but you'd love to get it for that. The fair figure is about where you think it would probably sell for. And the absolute is, you know what, if it goes past this, I am done and I am tapped.
Yeah.
And then once you have those three figures, you just work inside of them. So if there's a low number of registered bidders, kick it off in your dream number. If there's a more amount of registered bidders, you kick it off closer to your fair number. Between your dream number and your fair number, you should be sprinting, making people keep up with you. Between fair and absolute, you might start to slow up a little bit, but you're still working inside the framework that you have. So as soon as you have that plan, you've got a better chance. If you walk in with a reactive strategy, which is, we're going to wait to see what happens, you're cooked. Like, someone's going to have a better plan than you.
It's funny you say that, Justin, because, I see, and I love watching auctions, particularly even when I'm not bidding, but I see that most of the time people don't have a strategy like that. They have a strategy where they might have the fair price in their head as to what they're prepared to pay, and then it gets to that, goes over that. That's when they're, as you say, making decisions. What's my walkaway price? Do we, don't we? And they all give it away. So as an auctioneer, you're looking at that, obviously. You're looking at, okay, they've just gone over what they thought they were going to be bidding to, but they're still in it. And those people there, they're looking too comfortable. They're actually like ducks, but they may or may not have more money. It's just that they're not giving it away. But that's a tiny proportion of the bidders. What are you as an auctioneer? How do you play that? How do you because I wonder sometimes when people say they're out, most auctioneers don't take no for an answer, so how do you play that?
Yeah, well, you definitely learn to shrug off the first no, and sometimes the second no as well. So you kind of just get through the point of making sure they're definitely out. But like you, we look for body language cues. So if there's two decision makers and they talking to each other, that usually indicates they're close to being out, but there may be more money if they've already said they're out. Have they pulled their phones out? So sometimes what can happen is they pull their phones out to check a spreadsheet or check a stamp duty or check a,
the abacus.
But sometimes they genuinely pull their phones out because they're done and they're disengaged from the auction and they're going to get on social media. Like, you're looking for these different cues at different points of time. So I think we just try and learn to read that body language as much as we can. But the ultimate test will be when we count it down first, second, third time we're about to sell it and we check back and make sure they're out. That'll be the truest test of whether they're in or out. What you're looking for there is, do I need to give them more time or do I have pretty much a final decision? Never a perfect scenario, but that's what we'll work on.
Let's say you're bidding against yourself, Justin, right? You rock up and there's can we have any opening bids? And then bang, you do your strategy, right? What is do you just match their strategy with your strategy, right? Like a ping pong table, bang, 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 bang. Or do you flip your strategy, right? Like, do you do a sniper strategy, like at the end, come in hard at the end? Like, what would, if you couldn't use that strategy, what would be your go-to after that?
Yeah, we actually had this happen at home. We bid on probably about 12 or 14 months ago where we started it rapid bidding from competitors. So one competitor in particular, actually. So we kept going quickly, and it was quick. Basically, what I was looking for was at any point are they going to start to slow up? It's almost like a game of chicken. The first one to slow up sort of wins to a certain extent. So I would do that until I got to probably 2 bids off my fair figure, and then I might start to pause down a little bit. So slow it down and then see if you can change the pace a little bit. But the other thing that I would try and slip in there, which we did, is we did an unexpectedly high bid. So they went sort of 25, 25, 25, 25, bang, 50. So at least if a good auctioneer is running that auction, he goes to the other people and says, so 50 as well. And if they go, yep, all of a sudden they've done a bid almost without realising. Whereas they might go, no, well, we want 25, which is actually showing to tell to you that they're not that comfortable with the bidding being accelerated.
Okay, yeah, nice. Yep.
Yeah.
So I'd probably try and chip up. Most people's instincts are to chip down. That's how they kind of mitigate it. But again, it's like a wounded gazelle in front of the lion. If you've got someone professionally that does it for a living, they will sense that and they will eat you up. So you want to be kind of showing that confidence as best you can.
It's true.
I remember this auction when we were buying a few years ago up on the beaches, and it was that, right? There was the exhausting. Now, both, I think you said it's the absolute number, the one where you're absolutely out. I actually think there's another level after that, because sometimes people underestimate what their absolute is, right? They say that, but it's kind of the number where you want to wake up with no regrets, isn't it? It's sort of the similar thing where even if we had to get 10, 20 grand from family and we had to rattle the tin, and so I think there's another number there that, particularly if it goes just above that number. What's your thoughts on that sort of? Because I just remember this one where there were two bidders and they were emotionally, they were both way past their limit. You could tell they were flustered and they're extremely stressed. And then this guy was just hiding in the corner. They were so, they thought they had it. And then 3 times they just jumped in and threw 5K on it and just completely killed the auction. Do you see there's value in that sort of one where you just sit back and you just let other people, or do you think that's quite dangerous to do because, obviously they would have to pay more because everyone exhausted their limits?
Yeah. That's the strategy that most bidders think they're going to deploy, but it very, very rarely happens.
Yeah, okay.
That most bidders walk in thinking, we're just going to wait, and then we'll shoot it in the end like a white knight. The problem is it usually they're putting their first bid at a level where they're really uncomfortable, and that can sometimes turn them away from bidding. Plus, it's likely to be a premium figure as well. So you need a very experienced bidder who is very in touch with their budget to be able to execute that strategy. If you're not over those things, that is the worst strategy. Because you got to think about too is every bid that you place is a little kind of confidence builder for you. So the first bid's pretty scary, right? But you get your hand up and like, oh, that wasn't too bad. And then the next bid, you're like, oh, cool. Plus now the auctioneer's looking at me. So now we're making eye contact. Now I can just bid with, sort of nodding at him. So I've kind of got my confidence up a little bit. What you're relying on in that instance is you're cold, and they're jumping you right at the end.
Yeah.
So I think it's a dangerous strategy.
That getting comfortable with bidding though can also backfire because then you're in sort of in the flow of it. It's the consistency effect, and once you're actually bidding, you go okay, and then before you know it, you've actually bid more than you intended to or wanted to. That can happen as well. But I just think there's a lot of smart asses that hang back, and then they end up doing nothing anyway. So it's like, well, whatever. Well, but this also comes into the skill of an auctioneer, right? Because buyers very rarely are skilled at bidding. Like you said, if someone's really skilled, they can do certain or execute certain techniques. But if not, they are really unmatched. I mean, you guys practice, don't you? You role play, you rehearse, and this is all about the skills that you bring to the table, correct?
Well, it is to a certain extent. We do practice and we role play, and that's a big part of what we do. But I think, if you and I, Veronica, were running away from a bear, I don't need to be able to run faster than the bear. I just need to be able to run faster than you. So bidders don't need to beat the auctioneer. They just need to beat the other bidders. That's like, sometimes I think we get this misnomer that the bidders are competing with the auctioneer. You're not competing with the auctioneer at all. The auctioneer doesn't have what you wanted. Yeah.
Correct. But you're working those bidders to make sure they're in there competing with each other. And it is something I actually say to our clients. We are not competing. We're not even negotiating. You know, even in a blind auction, in a blind bidding scenario where we're making offers on the end of a telephone, how we negotiate if we're the only buyer, we're negotiating against the vendor and the agent versus when we know that there's other buyers in the fray, it's a completely different kettle of fish. And that's what the auction is, right? But you as the auctioneer, you're the choir master or you're the conductor, right? You want them in their bidding. That's where your involvement comes. It's not just them pitted against each other. How do you build that momentum?
We actually say we're the drummer. So we're the drummer in the band.
Okay.
We just try and keep the beat going. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to foster competition unquestionably between them. That's clear and apparent. But how do we do it? We just do it from experience and from practice and situational awareness. So every auction in its own way, they're a bit like snowflakes. You know, from the outside, they all kind of look the same. But inside an auction, every auction is unique in its own way. In terms of how bidders behave. So what you rely on is the trends that you notice in terms of bidder behaviour, what you can do to sort of stimulate bidding, what are the things we have up our sleeve if people are being slow to bid, fast to bid, not bidding the numbers we want, all those kinds of structured things. But yeah, I think we see our role as being two things. Firstly is we're a referee. So we referee legislation. You know, if a bidder does something they can't do, we try and referee. The second one is we commentate. So we commentate what we're seeing and we referee on legislation. That's kind of our role. But yeah, we say to buyers, there's two battles that you have to win. Battle one is you've got to be the best bidder. Battle two is you've got to satisfy the owner. So focus on those two battles. They're the two things. You're not fighting the owner for the property. You just need to satisfy them because they've got the asset that you want.
It's quite interesting. How much of those skills that a good auctioneer has are innate versus learnt?
This is such a good question and such a good debate. I think every great auctioneer, I think, has three things. The first thing is they can count. So that sounds like a no-brainer, but you've got to be able to count. Our accepted mistake rate is 0. One mistake at an auction is one too many because they're small mistakes, but they carry such big consequences. And I see sometimes, I'm loath to criticise any other auctioneers, but we see this thing where an auctioneer will be at the front and they'll have a scribe next to them. Our core business as an auctioneer is numbers. Our responsibility to our clients is that we can count. I shouldn't need someone to count for me because every time the scribe engages with me, I've got to look at the scribe's page. I take my eyes off the crowd, which means my engagement level of the crowd nosedives. The second thing every great auctioneer has is the ability to think on their feet. And the third thing is they call an auction that's authentic to who they are. So whatever their hallmarks as a person are, that's what they bring in their call. Whether that be humour or they're calm or whatever else that it might be. I reckon everything else other than those three you can learn.
Interesting.
But you probably need to have, and even the counting, you can learn and develop that. The other two, thinking on your feet. Thinking on your feet is one you can't learn. Like you either sort of have that or you don't have that. But everything else you can learn and develop, I reckon.
It's interesting. I do definitely agree with you on the thinking on your feet, and you see a really skilled auctioneer, but you've also got to have learnt those skills, as you say, how to keep things moving when it slows, that dialogue to have when you got someone heckling you. I mean, when I see someone masterful in action, I just think it's amazing because they're in flow. You know, they're not even thinking about, they're just pulling this stuff. But the counting thing, I'm not sure if I've given this story on the podcast before, but some years back, I bought a property at auction. The vendor was not at the auction, but I bought the property for less money than we bid. And the reason I could do that was because the auctioneer, and I had a scribe, we actually also note the bids because, you know, just in case there's any dispute, but we noted our bids and the auctioneer was not actually calling the full amount of the bid. You know, like if it's 1,240,000, for example, he just called the amount of the last bid. So he might have said 15,000 for argument's sake, right? And so we were tracking it. But when we actually went in to sign, he put a different price on, he'd actually lost count. And he actually put a price on that contract that was less than what the underbidder had bid. And we were just zipped it.
I bet he didn't correct him. Yeah, I bet he didn't rush in to cross it out.
And And I was sort of glaring at, my client, don't say a thing, don't mention the war, and we walked out of that having actually signed a contract for less money than the underbidder had bid. And I think once that was published, I'm sure that underbidder must be scratching their head thinking, what the hell went on there?
Yeah.
It's the only time in 25 years of being in real estate that I've come across that. But I was pretty happy.
Great example of small mistakes, big consequences.
It
cost that seller thousands of dollars, but it was a small mistake, but it was a large consequence that attached that small mistake.
Now, how much I know, years ago, as I mentioned to you off air, we've interviewed a number of auctioneers over the years of the podcast. In fact, our very first episode was with a behavioural scientist who went to an auctioneer and looked at all the behavioural biases that were in play, during this auction. And he'd never been to an auction before. And that happened to be an auction that was called by Tim Heaviside, who's a Melbourne-based agent and auctioneer. And we interviewed him some episodes later because we wanted to sort of say, well, Tim, this is actually your auction that was pulled apart. And one of the things I remembered from interviewing Tim was the amount of practice he put in. And he'd been doing it for some years at the time, and he was still doing role plays and still practicing. And that just, I guess it scared me in many ways, because I just think that is no buyer can match themselves with that level of dedication to the craft. How many hours of practice would you think an average auctioneer, let's not go for the high performers here, just how many hours of practice would an average auctioneer put in per week as they build their skills?
Well, it depends on how many auctions you're calling. So when you're calling auctions, you're getting paid to practice, because every auction you call is a practice session, basically. But if you're not getting paid, then you need to do unpaid sessions. So we say the rate of improvement, of rapid improvement, is sort of 350 auctions a year. So it's basically an auction a day. That's a live auction a day, give or take. But in terms of practice outside, if you're calling 350 auctions for the year, you're probably wanting to devote at least another 10 hours, I'd say, per week to auction practice. So that may be mathematical improvement, that may be scenario-based role play, that may be legislative questions, so on and so forth. So the stuff that's kind of like the nuts and bolts where you put it all together and it makes something, you should be practicing those isolated ones, but then you've got to have the live whole package practices on top of that. I think the hard part is when you get at the start, you really need practice. No one wants to pay you to practice on their properties. And then when you've been in the industry for a long time, you're calling a lot of auctions, you actually don't really need the practice anymore, but you get a lot of practice because you're doing so many. So it's funny how that kind of wheel kind of keeps spinning. You just need to get the wheel spinning in the first instance.
Justin, what do you think about when you're looking at buyers? Like, we talked about some strategies, but what sort of, how do you as an auctioneer change your strategy? Do you profile the buyers into certain buckets in your mind? And, I know that I'm going to be able to have to change my tone or the way that I speak to this person because I think they're this type of bucket. Like, how do you sort of practice in terms of buyer profiling and what's going to get the best outcome to get the highest bid from them, I guess?
Yeah, I think the buyer profiling becomes really important when you're behind closed doors in a negotiation. That's when it's really important to understand who you're dealing with and how you deal with it. In terms of generally calling for bids, the biggest adjustment you're generally going to make is your speed. So is it one decision maker or multiple? Are they having conversations pre and post every bid they're making? Do they look like they need more time? Are they actually giving me responses, or this could be blank answers that come back? That's probably the adjustment you're going to make, is in terms of the speed of your bidding. And you may have a situation where you've got one bidder and they're going to bid, but they're going to wait for that third call. So in that case there, I'll trial close really quickly. Do we get you back in? First, second, third time, bang, they bid. Whereas this person over here, they're not waiting for the third call. They're just really slow at bidding. So then I'm going to be slower to actually trial close on that side. So that's probably the adjustment, is on speed more than anything else. But personality and language is more so when we go behind closed doors.
It's interesting. I've been a couple of auctions recently where there was a bidder who was quite uncertain of themselves, unsure, and obviously I'm familiar with the auction process, and they're actually asking the auctioneer for, should I bid 50? I mean, I was like, oh my God, please, I'll help you for free.
I'll help you for free. Yeah. That's, and that's, yeah.
Do you get that very often?
I hope it would take advantage of that situation. And, but you do get a lot of bidders that are unsure, and in that case there, you definitely try and soften your tone, your language, your volume. not given the fast liberty, but to put pressure on them. You actually want the opposite, where you relieve pressure on them, give them more time for their decision making. But yeah, it's a bit of a case by case sort of basis to look at.
What about just some, housekeeping, I guess, items? He's mentioned there about someone picking up their phone, looking at spreadsheets. Probably not a good sign that you're going to be near them. But what about some other ones? Do you actually bring your partner? Do you bring your mum and dad? Do you bring your dog? Do you wear something different? Like, is there certain things where you think, in your experience, because you've seen thousands, that, in terms of actually scaring, because like you said, you're not competing against the auctioneer, but you are competing against other buyers. And, behavioural science does come into this a lot. Do you see that the ones that, maybe rock up by themselves, or some other smaller things that you've noticed that you think get better outcomes?
Yeah, I'd say it's okay to bring family and friends, but don't have it with you during the bidding.
Okay.
Or the last thing you need is an outside influence that isn't you, that's giving you advice on what to do, good or bad. So, that's something you really, like, the only people that should be inside that circle of decision making are either the people that are buying it, or a very, very, very trusted advisor who is understanding your alignment first. Yeah, we have a lot of people, and I'm going to get loath to criticise, we have a lot of people that take that chance, that opportunity to sort of be the person that makes the decisions for them. Like, it's some sort of like, I've got the power to, and it's about them, not about the people that are actually making decisions. Like, and it's the same with sellers, is we say to sellers, unless the people you're bringing into the room have got a say in the decision making and have read every report that the agents have sent to them, don't bring them in the room. Because you don't need them telling you, oh, you'll get more after, when we've sent 3 weeks of reports saying that every single buyer is here and ready to buy your property. Like, they're doing it with the best of intentions to protect you, but they're actually going to do more harm for you in the long term. So, yeah, that's the thing, is I'd limit the decision makers. And if you've got one part that's going to be particularly emotional, you might be better off them not being there, and one person have the responsibility of being on the phone, whatever it might be.
I've seen some of that interference at auctions, both vendors and buyers, and it's very rarely good.
It is.
What about, there's certain buyers that like to turn up and try to intimidate other buyers. Actually, I was on the Money Puzzle podcast only this week when we were recording this, and I was asked a question, what about the bidder that rocks up with an E-type Jag and, parks right at the front, makes a big song and dance? And I'm like, I think most people just think they're a wanker. But, do you think that any of that posturing actually has any great effect with other bidders?
No, not really. I actually think it's the opposite. I think sometimes the people that act that way are compensating because they feel like they're not going to have the capacity to buy. But yeah. The good ones always parking in the driveway. That's always a big alpha move, is parking in the driveway.
Yes.
Acting like you already own the property.
Own it.
Yeah. We had one where we had a older man and a young female bidding against each other last year, and the older man was walking towards the young female, like physical sort of intimidation, to the point where we had to stand between them and say to him, the auction will not continue until you go back to your position.
Wow.
Now that's very rare. That's happened once in my career where, he's tried some sort of physical intimidation. So yeah, it's pretty uncommon, but yeah, most people are pretty okay. I think they don't carry on too much.
I always laugh at the people that do take the entire entourage, and it's like, oh no. I mean, it can go either way. One thing I really hate seeing at auctions is heavily pregnant women. That in that big time nesting phase. Usually they will bid harder. As a couple, they often bid harder at that stage than they do at any other stage of the pregnancy.
Most of them actually bought their property when she was in labour with their second child. Yeah. So they had a friend bidding for them. So, pretty strong motivation there.
I was 8 days off giving birth when we bought a house, but it wasn't me bidding, it was my ex. And
yeah,
I think he was definitely bidding with that in mind.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, the nesting instinct.
Yes. Justin, have you got an example of a property dumbo for us? We're sure that we've got a lesson we can learn from a story you can share with us.
Oh, I don't know if it's about a dumbo, but it's one of the most memorable things that's happened to me. We put this on our social media actually last year. We put a lot about bidding, sort of things that happened on Instagram, and We did the description, gave it a good razz, asked for an opening bid. And then as we asked for an opening bid, there was silence for about 3 seconds. And then someone yells out, "Are we on the market?" And I was like, how could we be on the market? Are we on the market? What do you mean? Like, we can't be on the market. Well, I'm just asking. It's like, what do you, like, and what I really wanted to say was that I was so stunned by the question, like, and like that person had arrived with the only strategy was to ask and it's on the market. Like, not even withstanding the fact that we haven't had a bid yet to potentially to get, like, it just speaks sometimes, I think, that the lesson would be is, like, a little bit of knowledge about something is way more dangerous than no knowledge at all. Like, do your research as to what things actually sort of look like. But
Justin,
yeah.
I mean, that's just, you're right. Like that, you can see those. I mean, sometimes, I mean, I guess, does that person that is playing it a little bit dumb, but does look like they've got some cash to spend, do people sometimes just go, hang on a sec, this person's just going to keep going, and they've got really no like they're just a little bit delusional and irrational. Have you ever seen that sort of work, that playing it dumb strategy?
No, we've had some neighbours sometimes look like, they're a bit wild. Yeah. We had one where the neighbour wanted to buy the property and they kind of, I think they organised quite a few of their friends to be out the front yard with some loud music and then when he came across and bid, he'd basically lean over the fence and go, yeah, mate, like just a bit of that. But it's pretty uncommon. Like, most auctions are pretty straightforward. There is some crazy stuff that happens from time to time, but that keeps it interesting, I suppose.
Well, that's where experience kicks in, isn't it? Knowing how to handle the odd occasion where something strange happens, but asking, is it on the market before there's even been a bid is just gold. But you're right, There's so many opinions out there, and I love it. Particularly, you're an auctioneer. I'm sure people tell you how to run an auction. I'm a buyer's agent. I've been a sales agent. I've been at possibly thousands of auctions by now, and I'm astounded at the amount of people that will just offer me their free auction bidding advice. I'm like, I literally wrote a book about this, guys. I mean, this just cracks me up that everybody's got an opinion and nobody seems to be shy about sharing it. Look, that's been a really interesting chat, Justin. We've been trying to get you on the podcast for a long time, and so it's been great to be able to finally catch up with you. Thank you for coming along.
Pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in an upcoming Q&A episode, you can send us a voicemail or written question via the website, theelephantintheroom.com.au, or you can email us directly at questions@theelephantintheroom.com.au. If you like what you're hearing, please share this episode with others you feel would benefit. And while you're at it, why not leave us an iTunes review? 5 stars would be great. I know that sounds a bit cringy, but we have it on good authority that every review helps make it easier for other people to find out about us and hear what our amazing guests have to say.